The Cold Steel Tuff Lite. I love Cold Steel. And this is a very interesting knife from theirs. They've been making these things for over a decade now, I think. I'm filming this early to mid-2022. I remember seeing these hit the market around 2012, maybe even 2013 it was. So just about a decade. They're still making them. They still haven't changed them. Still have not changed the blade steel on them. It's still AUS 8A. That's what they had when they first came out with them years ago, as far as I remember. Let's get right into the review. I'm a huge Cold Steel fan, and this is not like most of the knives they usually make, and I'll explain what I'm talking about in just a minute here, but it's a great knife. This is an absolute amazing utility folding knife. It's extremely strong, it's overbuilt, but it's also very light. This is a great utility slash EDC folder. It's got some downsides, but it's also got a lot of strong points too. Let's get right into the review. It weighs 2.5 ounces, so yes, it is pretty light, but what's its blade length? 2.5 inches. Handle length is 3.5 inches, making the overall length 6 inches on the nose. I would consider this to be a small knife, even maybe medium small. It's a little wide for being a smaller knife, but I love the shape it has right here. It's like a half moon shape, half of a circle. Like this wide old lanyard hole right here. We also have an oval shaped hole for the blade. Sorry, the blade's giving me kind of a glare. I don't know why it's doing that, but I like little details like that. I like it when we have a return of pattern on the knife, or a pattern, so to speak. Oval shaped hole on the blade, and oval shaped hole in the handle. Not that it matters too much, but whatever. Triad lock, like Cold Steel puts on about half of their knives now. It's a lockback mechanism with an added stop pin in between both the tang of the blade and the very end of the lock bar. One of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world, period. Does a knife this small need it? No, not really. You could get away with a lockback, but going under the philosophy of being overbuilt, that is excellent. It's extremely strong. This is not going to disengage on you no matter what you do to it, I don't think. Very, very strong. For being such a small, light knife, we have an FRN, or what they call Grivex, or Grivery handles right here. It's plastic and glass mixed together. It's what a lot of knives use. It's extremely strong. It's extremely light. Again, not going to break on you. There are no metal liners in there of any kind. Satin finish on the blade. It is a sheep's foot. Oh man, that glare. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. None of my other knives make the camera glare so much. I'm so sorry. Sheep's foot style blade. We have somewhat of a tip, but it is very obtuse. It's not going to pierce very well. It reminds me of a box cutter blade. That's exactly what it looks like to me. An X-Acto blade you put into some sort of box cutter. But it's much, much better than that. It's a lot stronger. It's not just a razor either. We have an AUS 8A blade steel on here with a hollow grind. It is tip down carry only. That pot clip is swappable to the left side, making this a 100% ambidextrous folding knife. Hallelujah for the lefties. We have cutouts in the spine of the handle up here that accommodate the lock bar, as well as the same style cutouts on the spine of the blade up here. Again, another attention to detail, another pattern that we can see. It works okay, but it doesn't work great. It doesn't really lock your thumb in, but it locks it in just enough if you wanted to use it. Extremely comfortable. Two big old choils right here is a lot to grip onto, despite being a smaller knife. You know, it's only 6 inches overall length, but it completely just gets enveloped by my hand. Completely. There is no way in hell this thing is going to get knocked out of my hand in this position. Absolutely not. It's completely locked in there. You can scooch down to here. Your pinky is not going to have any of the handle to grip onto, but your thumb still rides up on this jimping up here, so it gives you just a little bit of texture, a little something something to lock your thumb in. It doesn't work too well again, but it's okay. The cutting edge itself, I want to say, is about 2 inches long. I didn't measure it, but I think it's just about 2 inches. I'll annotate in right here what its actual length is. You do have that extra inch of length right there. So if you were using this in a defensive situation, if you wanted a little bit of extra reach, you do have it there without the knife going over a legal edge. Some states have stipulations on how long the knife's blade can be, what you're allowed to carry, etc. It's ridiculous, but this is a very friendly looking knife. It looks like a box cutter. Most people are going to look at this and think it's a tool. They look at another folding knife Cold Steel makes, a Voyager, a Recon 1, or any of the Spyderco knives, whatever, and that looks like a scary weapon a criminal would have all of a sudden. At the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's still a cutting edge, and you have a handle to grip onto, and it locks in place. Doesn't really matter. But this looks very friendly, which is an advantage it has. The price on this retails at $50.99. However, you can get these all day long for around the, I don't know, I said it like I was Canadian, all day long for around the $30 range, if not a little bit less. high 20s, 28, 29 you can find it for. So very affordable. It's a great knife for the money. I also like this little bevel they have on both sides as well. Like the squared off pocket clip right here. It's good. It works well. I have no problems with the pocket clip. It does kind of cave in here because they use this pocket clip on their tie lights as well as the pocket Bushman. I think they use it on some others, but basically they didn't change the pocket clip design at all to accommodate the cutout in the handle right here. So you can see it just kind of like caves in because it's literally caving into the handle. It's like getting sunk in there. They didn't compensate for it in a way, but it's not that big of a deal. It carries just fine because the handle's very smooth. We even have some texturing here, which helps just a little. Gives it a little something right there. Really positive lock on here. Again, I've talked about the triad lock many times, but if you're not familiar with it, it's an extremely, extremely strong, secure locking mechanism. There is no way that's going to disengage on you. It's completely overbuilt for this knife, this size, and its shape. There's no way that locking mechanism will ever disengage on you. I just don't see it happening. It's really strong. Basically, this is very affordable. The AUS 8A blade steel is good. I would say it's a little bit better than 8CR13 MOV, which is also a cheaper blade steel. It gets razor sharp, and Cold Steel puts a great heat treatment on it. The downside is it will dull on you relatively fast, but you can get it sharp pretty fast too, so it's not that big of a deal. For $30, you can't really beat it. It's great. And if you're using this for defense, it's not the best knife for that. It is a little slow on the deployment, which is one of the downsides to this locking mechanism right here, because there's so much pressure going on the blade. It's a little bit more on the stiff side versus a liner locking knife or something where there's less pressure. Yeah, the locking mechanism is less strong, but you can deploy it a lot faster. This, you can do it. You got to give it a bit of a wrist flick though. I mean, good luck flicking it without... there you go. I kind of did it there. You can flick it open without too much of a wrist flick, I should say, but it's a little clumsy. There's not a whole lot to hold on to. It's not that big. It's not like really slim either. It's somewhere in between, but it's just... You really have to dig into the thumb hole there, and if you're in a stressful situation, you got to whip the knife out quickly. You could do it, but it's kind of a toss-up. It's not super secure or anything. It's not too bad. I kind of changed my mind here. I was going to say it's kind of tricky to open up. No, you can do it pretty easily. It's just it's not as easy as a lot of other options out there for knives, even to the same size. Again, it's slightly clumsy because of how smooth the edges are here. You can see it's a very smooth, friendly looking and friendly feeling knife. Really like that about it. But as far as defense goes, it's not your best option because, again, opening up is going to be just a little clumsy there. But if you practice with it, you'll be fine. So in a pinch, this can work for a defensive or some sort of stressful situation. But it's just not your best option. There's better knives out there, but it'll work. The main use for this knife is going to be conventional EDC uses as well as for work. It's a work knife. You have a lot to grip onto. It's extremely strong, and this style blade is good for cutting open boxes, opening packages. It's good for any sort of like box cutting knife, utility knife, cutting zip ties, your typical worky work stuff. That's what this knife's good for, and it looks very friendly too. It's a friendly looking, smooth, rounded knife. Again, even the edges are smooth. It's very comfortable to hold. It's a very delightful, pleasant little knife, and it's affordable, $30. It's great. It's one of the best knives out there for utility purposes for this price range. It's great. And again, I love the way it looks. It's so friendly. It's like a little egg or something. It's really cool. It's one of my favorite utility knives. I had to pick a utility knife. It's probably going to be this one right here, again, because it's super strong. It is super light, hence the name Tuff Lite. No surprises there. And it's going to be legal too. So if you did have to use this in a defensive type situation, heaven forbid that had to happen, but if you did have to defend yourself with this thing, I think it will hold up pretty well in court because it doesn't look scary. It won't scare the average, I was going to say sheeple. That's not really correct grammar. The average person, the sheep person, Sherson. It won't scare the average person because it looks like a utility knife. It doesn't look like a weapon, which is ridiculous. I mean, anything can be used as a weapon. So, but the average civilian does not believe that, I don't think so. Again, it's not a great defensive option, but it is an option. It's not bad either. It's not good. It's not bad for that. It's supposed to be a utility knife. I mean, to be a defensive weapon, you'd have to have a little bit more traction, I think. It would have to deploy a little faster. You'd have to have a little bit more grip onto the blade. See, you got to really with purpose opened that up. So some knives you don't even think twice about it. You just move your finger slightly and bam, it's open. This you have to intently kind of give it a wrist flick there. You see I goof up occasionally sometimes. And with a stressful situation, it might just fly out of your hands because it's just not, there's not enough to grip onto. Bottom line, really good, strong, light utility EDC knife. It's great. This would make a great gift for someone who's not necessarily into knives. I think they'll like it because it's very strong, it's very friendly looking, it's very comfortable. You have a lot to grip onto, super secure. It's a great, great EDC option. It's just not the best for defense, despite being a cold steel knife. Most of their knives look like weapons. You know, they're supposed to be really strong, fast deploying, martial or defensive type blades. This is not. This is a utility knife. It's an EDC knife. But it still can work in defense. Once you have this knife in this position, there's no way it's going to get knocked out of your hand. You do want some reach for defense typically, so you can go down here. If you put a big old lanyard hole on there, which pretty much any lanyard will work for that hole. It's a massive, massive hole. You'll have a little bit more to grip onto as well. So it can work if you just do a slash motion or a slicing type motion. It'll work just fine. Don't laugh at small knives. And those little cutting edges will completely rip someone open if you just get the right angle on there. You know, never ever laugh at a little knife. But that being said, there's definitely better options out there. So, repeating myself now, great EDC knife, very strong, very tough, very light. Excellent EDC choice right here. Excellent knife for work, for utility tasks, for box cutting, for cutting zip ties and such. It beats all the box cutters out of the water easily. Completely overbuilt, completely strong. Great EDC knife. Very affordable too. You can get a couple of these, give them to friends. There's also the mini Tuff Lite. If you want something even smaller and you wanted to sacrifice just a little bit of cutting edge, you can go with that one too. Just a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller, a little bit more affordable. Carries well. I would have liked to see it as tip up because I don't really give a crap about tip up or tip down. I like tip up more. I prefer it, but I don't really care that much. However, I do notice when I switch back to this knife because I rotate through a lot of different knives in my EDC. Once I switch back to this knife, I do like, I pull it out of my pocket, I'm like, I have to like rotate it into my hand. Then I open it up. If it's tip up, you know, as soon as I grab it, it's in this position. My thumb's right there. It's ready to be deployed. But tip down, I just kind of have to pivot it into my grip, and then I deploy it. Not a big deal, but with my muscle memory being used to tip up, it's a little weird. But it must just be to accommodate the lanyard hole right there. I guess that's why they went with it. Let me show you an interesting comparison here. Here's another small knife, another one of my favorites, the Kershaw OD2. Now, the Kershaw OD2, despite being even smaller, I mean, you take a look at both of these knives, and you're like, oh, the Tuff Lite's way bigger. But you look at the cutting edges, the OD2 actually has a slightly longer cutting edge. From the measurement from the handle to the blade, I think the Tuff Lite actually has a longer blade, but as far as cutting edge is concerned, the OD2 wins. Very interesting. But you have a lot less to grip onto on this guy right here. It is a smaller knife. You can probably fit two OD2s into one of these Tuff Lites right here. I just wanted to bring it up because it's interesting how you can have a longer cutting edge despite the knife being so much smaller. But again, it's not really the point of the knife. The Tuff Lite, you have more to grip onto. If it came to defense, I'd pick the Tuff Lite despite having a smaller cutting edge. The business end being smaller, I still prefer the Tuff Lite for defense because there's just more to grip onto. It's more secure. We have a stronger locking mechanism. Despite being just slightly heavier and slightly bigger and slightly more cumbersome, we have a smaller cutting edge here. But that's not the whole deal. I mean, even if you have a really huge cutting edge, what matters more is that tip. You know, the amount of reach you have is slightly more important. You just have so much more to grip onto. If you haven't noticed already, you probably did by now, but the cutout in the blade right here matches the cutout of the half choil they have of the handle right here, and it finishes it off. So when you grip in there, you have a lot to grip onto, and it's really, really secure. So interesting comparison right here. But if you just want a knife for EDC, you don't want it to be for very hard work, something like this, or, you know, just opening packages, scoring tape off of boxes, doing small tasks, opening mail, tiny little things, OD2 works just fine. However, you want heavier tasks. Despite a smaller cutting edge, the Tuff Lite will beat, I think, most folding knives in this size and in this price range. Very strong. So interesting. So that's like a medium, smaller knife. Let's roll the OD2 back in there. This is what I would definitely call a small knife. And then let's throw in this guy, the Gerber Sumo. I have never showed this knife on my channel yet. Interesting folder. This is what I consider a large folder. It's a lot to grip onto right here. It's approaching an XL size. So interesting comparison. Just thought I'd show you there because Cold Steel is usually known for their bigger knives. I figured I'd show a smaller one of mine. It's not my favorite Cold Steel. It's not my favorite knife, but it is a kick-ass utility knife. So anyway, that is it. That is the Cold Steel Tuff Lite. Interesting EDC choice. It's good enough. It's very strong, fast enough. Not the best defensive option, but it's a great EDC utility knife. So anyway, that is it.